Briscoe gets the early jump on Larson as they come down the back straightaway.
When most people think NASCAR, they picture cars turning left for 500 miles on an oval track. But what if I told you that a NASCAR stock car showed up to the most prestigious endurance race in the world and absolutely embarrassed some of the fastest GT cars ever built? This isn't some fantasy. It actually happened. At the 2023 24 Hours of Le Mans, a modified Chevrolet Camaro ZL1 from NASCAR's Cup Series didn't just participate as a novelty act. It went out there and posted lap times that were 4 seconds faster than the closest Ferrari, leaving Porsche, Aston Martin, and even Corvette teams scratching their heads. But here's the thing, this shouldn't have been possible. Le Mans is where the world's most advanced racing technology comes to play. These are purpose-built racing machines that have been refined for decades specifically for this track. So how did a car designed to go fast in a circle end up being the fastest GT-class machine at one of motorsport's most demanding venues? The story starts with NASCAR's recent evolution. Over the past few years, the sport has undergone massive changes that most casual fans probably haven't noticed. The new next-generation cars look nothing like the boxy, outdated machines people remember. These cars now feature sleek aerodynamic designs that wouldn't look out of place in a sci-fi movie. They've ditched the old 5 lug nuts for center lock wheels, just like Formula One cars use. The tires have transformed from those chunky, tall sidewall designs to low-profile racing slicks that look surprisingly modern. Perhaps most importantly, NASCAR added rear diffusers to these cars, those complex aerodynamic elements you typically see on sophisticated racing machines. This was huge because it showed NASCAR was serious about making cars that could handle more than just left turns. And that's exactly what they've been doing. NASCAR has been adding more and more road courses to their schedule, places like Circuit of the Americas in Austin, the historic Watkins Glen, and even created the Charlotte Roval, a combination of oval and road course that tests drivers in completely new ways. Stock cars weren't just for turning left anymore, and the racing proved it. But even with all these improvements, nobody expected a NASCAR to be competitive at Le Mans. When the announcement came that NASCAR had partnered with Hendrick Motorsports to take a ZL1 Camaro to France, reactions were mixed at best. Picture this beast, a 3,000-pound stock car with no doors, no headlights, and a 5.8-liter naturally aspirated V8 that sounds like thunder rolling across the French countryside. To many, it seemed absolutely bonkers. Fans were split between excitement and skepticism. Some drivers were openly questioning the whole project. A lot of drivers were saying, "Why are you doing this? What do you get out of it?" The response was beautifully simple. Fun. What's the point otherwise if you're not smiling? The concerns weren't completely unfounded. Many people worried that while the car might be fast on the Mulsanne Straight, it would become a rolling roadblock through Le Mans' technical sections. The race organizers were so concerned about the car's pace that they actually proposed having marshals wave white flags every time it went by, the same flag they used to warn drivers about a crashed or broken car limping back to the pits. That's not just insulting, it's downright disrespectful. But Hendrick Motorsports doesn't do anything halfway. When they assembled the driver lineup, they made it clear this wasn't just a publicity stunt. Mike Rockenfeller, a Le Mans winner with Audi who knows every inch of the Circuit de la Sarthe, Jimmie Johnson, the 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion who's proven he can adapt to any racing situation, and Jenson Button, the 2009 Formula One world champion who brings decades of road racing experience. This dream team would be competing under the Garage 56 banner, a special experimental entry that Le Mans uses for cars that don't fit into traditional categories. Previous Garage 56 entries included the wild Delta Wing concept car and various alternative fuel vehicles. The rules were simple. They could race, but they'd be in their own class and would have to start at the back of the field no matter how fast they qualified. And here's where things get interesting. Because the Garage 56 entry doesn't have to conform to any traditional rule book, the team had freedom that other competitors could only dream of. In NASCAR, engines are restricted to 510 horsepower on superspeedways and 670 horsepower everywhere else. But for Le Mans, Hendrick's engineers crank that 5.8-liter V8 up to around 750 horsepower. To put that in perspective, the GTE cars they'd be racing against were limited to around 600 horsepower through balance of performance regulations. The NASCAR had a 150 horsepower advantage right off the bat. But there was a catch. NASCAR engines are typically rebuilt every 500 miles or so. At Le Mans, this engine would need to survive nearly 5,000 miles of racing over 24 hours. So they had to dial back the RPM limit slightly to ensure reliability. But the fundamental V8 architecture remained completely stock. The sound difference was immediately obvious. While the other cars had highly tuned, somewhat muffled engines designed for efficiency, this Camaro brought that deep, rumbling NASCAR V8 note that you could hear coming from miles away. It was the kind of sound that makes your chest vibrate and puts a smile on your face. The gearbox setup was particularly clever. They kept the same rear-mounted transaxle that NASCAR uses, but swapped the sequential stick shifter for a Formula One-style steering wheel with paddle shifts. It was a perfect blend of NASCAR engineering with modern racing convenience. But the real engineering challenge was stopping all that power. Standard NASCAR steel brakes simply wouldn't cut it at Le Mans, where cars brake from over 200 miles per hour multiple times per lap. So they installed full carbon-carbon brake systems, the same high-tech setup used by every other car in the field. The aerodynamic package was where you could really see the team's ambition. This car sprouted enormous dive planes on the front, a massive front splitter, and huge canards on the rear. These dive planes work by directing airflow upward, which creates an equal and opposite reaction that pushes the car down onto the track. The result was 50% more downforce than a standard next-gen NASCAR. But here's what's brilliant about their approach. They could have just bolted on a massive rear wing like a prototype car, but that wouldn't be the NASCAR way. Instead, they stuck with a spoiler design, but made it absolutely enormous. The car looked unmistakably like a NASCAR, just one that had been fed a steady diet of steroids and aerodynamic supplements. One of the most entertaining aspects was watching pit stops. While every other car at Le Mans uses air jacks that automatically lift the vehicle, NASCAR still uses the traditional jackman. During driver changes, instead of stepping out of a door, drivers had to climb through the window opening. It should have been a massive disadvantage, but this crew was so well drilled that they actually won their class in the Le Mans Pit Stop Challenge. Watching them beat teams with far more advanced equipment was like watching David take down Goliath with a slingshot.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Goodyear worked closely with the team to develop custom tires that were absolutely crucial to the car's success. The standard NASCAR Cup tire would have been a disaster at Le Mans. The car would have been so tire-limited in the high-speed corners and long braking zones that they'd need to pit twice as often as everyone else. So Goodyear designed tires that were 2 inches wider at the rear and incorporated incredibly sophisticated temperature sensors that were actually laminated into the tire itself rather than mounted on the wheel rim. This gave them lighter, more accurate data about tire performance throughout each stint. Weight was another massive challenge. The Cup car started at just under 1,500 kilograms, which made it 300 kilos heavier than the GTE cars and a whopping 500 kilos heavier than the hypercar prototypes. Every pound matters at Le Mans, so the team went on an extreme diet, removing 220 kilograms from the car. They eliminated the special reinforced structures that allow NASCAR cars to bump draft. That technique where one car can actually push another car faster by riding in its slipstream. They swapped steel body panels for carbon fiber wherever possible. They even reduced the weight of individual tires. And of course, they had to add headlights because unlike NASCAR where headlight decals are perfectly fine, you actually need real lights to race through the night at Le Mans. When they finally got the car on track for testing, the feedback was immediately positive. But the real shock came when they tackled the Porsche curves, Le Mans' most technical section. Everyone expected the big, heavy NASCAR to struggle through the tight corners, but it held its own beautifully. Then came qualifying, and this is where jaws started dropping around the paddock. Jenson Button took the wheel and posted a lap time of 3 minutes, 47.976 seconds. The fastest GTE car? 3 minutes and 51 seconds. The NASCAR wasn't just competitive, it was 4 seconds faster than purpose-built sports cars that had been developed specifically for this track. Now, there's an important caveat here. The GTE field operates under strict balance of performance regulations that limit power, weight, fuel load, and aerodynamics to keep all the different manufacturers competitive. The NASCAR had none of these restrictions. The only limitation was that Hendrick wanted it to still look like a NASCAR. So while the performance was impressive, it wasn't exactly a level playing field. But here's where things got politically interesting. The original Garage 56 rules stated that the experimental entry had to start at the very back of the field behind all the hypercars, LMP2 cars, and GTE entries. But when race officials saw how fast the NASCAR was in qualifying, they got nervous about the carnage that might ensue when this missile came charging through the field on the opening lap. So they made a special exception, allowing the car to start between the GTE and LMP2 classes. Race day proved that the qualifying pace was no fluke. When the green flag dropped, the NASCAR absolutely flew past the GTE field and even managed to overtake several LMP2 prototypes. The car was devastating in traction zones and on the first half of the long straights, though the purpose-built sports cars would catch up by the end of the Mulsanne due to their superior aerodynamic efficiency. The biggest weakness was braking. As Mike Rockenfeller explained during the race, braking is probably the area that's the toughest for us. It's a big thing to try and stop into these chicanes. The combination of extra weight and a car setup optimized for different types of corners made the heavy braking zones particularly challenging. But the fans absolutely loved it. The distinctive V8 rumble made the car a crowd favorite, though it also became a source of complaints from campers trying to sleep through the night. You could hear this thing coming from literally miles away, and it had a sound that no other car in the field could match. Then, Le Mans did what Le Mans does. It started raining. Hard. Cars were sliding off track everywhere, and the NASCAR became even more of a handful. Despite all the aerodynamic improvements and custom tires, this was still fundamentally a car with more power than grip, making it especially tricky in wet conditions. You could see it getting loose on corner exit and sketchy under braking, but the drivers adapted brilliantly. Then disaster struck. All that extra horsepower finally took its toll, and the gearbox exploded in spectacular fashion. The sound was absolutely dreadful, like mechanical death rattles echoing across the French countryside. Under normal Le Mans rules, a gearbox failure means you're done. But because this was the experimental Garage 56 entry, race officials allowed them to replace it. After an hour in the garage, the car was back out there, though the extended pit stop had dropped them to 39th overall. But they pressed on, determined to complete the full 24 hours and prove that American stock car engineering could go the distance. Throughout the race, the technical team was collecting invaluable data. Scott Meisters from ECR Engines reported that the engine is doing great. The powertrain is looking good. The engine and all of its vitals are meeting what we've observed on all our durability runs. It was validation that NASCAR's V8 technology, even when pushed to 750 horsepower, could handle the ultimate endurance test. The stint rotations were carefully managed, with each driver getting experience in different conditions. Jimmie Johnson got his first taste of Le Mans traffic management and was amazed by the fan response. "It was incredible," he said after one stint. "All in all, just an amazing experience. One of the slow zones, it was a very crowded area with the fans. They were waving at me, so I was waving back. It was really, really fun." As the race progressed through the night and into Sunday morning, the Garage 56 car kept churning out laps. They crossed the 200 lap mark, then 250, then finally hit the magical 285 laps when the checkered flag fell. That's 2,413.1 miles, the equivalent of running 4 Daytona 500s back-to-back. Jimmie Johnson took the honor of driving across the finish line, bringing the car home in 39th place out of the 62-car field. Mission accomplished. NASCAR chairman Jim France was emotional afterward, saying, "That was unbelievable. That was thousands of hours of hard work by hundreds of people that went into making this thing happen. I hope my dad and my brother are somewhere up there looking down and smiling, but the goal when we set out was to try and finish the race running at the end and not be last. And we accomplished that.